we've talked about the schedule so far here on the show. We've done 8 games. I believe I'm 4-4 so far for Virginia Tech. I think Jack is either 5-3 or 6-2. He has the more optimistic outlook on this season. And we talked about towards the end of the episode last week, what I think the number's going to be out there in Las Vegas. And these books love putting up these numbers early, so that way they can get action, which is, look, unless you really like a number or you really project the team to do really well, I'm not playing anything until after spring ball because these rosters are not final. They're not going to be final. Heck, they might not even be final in July and August, but I'm just not playing anything because some large player on somebody's team could leave and go somewhere else and change 2 win totals potentially. Now you're trying to guess who's leaving, who's coming in. It's just a lot of work, but it's at least a good baseline to look at when it comes to these win totals. And so FanDuel has given us all of the ACC win totals. And I'll give it to you. We'll start at the top. Clemson's the highest with 9.5. That makes sense. Everybody's really high on Clemson. They love the way Clemson ended last season, at least before the playoffs came about. They all love what Clemson did. Klubnik is back for now. And they have a schedule that's conducive to them being successful. It's nowhere near as tough as what it was last year. 9.5 makes sense. Then your group at 8.5, SMU, Miami, and Louisville, 3 teams that were busy in the transfer portal, had talent already in place. It makes sense that they would be in the next group of people. Once again, I'm not ready to always buy the hype for Miami. Miami lived up to some of the hype that they had last year, but I still maintain the conference helped them out a little bit. And that's why they had a little bit better record than you thought. They lost that game at the end of Syracuse, didn't make the ACC championship game. So Miami is trying to build some momentum off of a little bit of a rough finish to their 2024 campaign, but they are at 8.5. Georgia Tech, Florida State, and North Carolina are all at 7.5. Part of that is Belichick, some respect for Bill Belichick and what he's trying to do for his North Carolina Tar Heels. So I think that's what we're kind of looking at here when it comes to North Carolina's number being 7.5. Although I think it's interesting. I think DraftKings had it at 6.5 earlier, might be 7.5. And then, of course, Georgia Tech and Florida State also at 7.5. I mean, I guess people are assuming last year was just a one-off for Florida State where they just basically struggled one year and that's it. The talent is there, but it's going to take a little bit for them to kind of change the outlook for this team because last year was so bad. They've got to get back to finding the winning ways and being the Florida State of old that all of us are really, really used to. All right. And then the 6.5s come about. And this is where we find Virginia Tech lumped in with NC State, Duke, and Cal. So now when you look at these teams here, not exactly the greatest group of teams to be to put together with. NC State, Duke, and Cal? I don't know. That's not exactly great. NC State didn't have the best season last year. Duke had a really good season, but they've lost some guys. And then Cal is Cal. The Cal needs a new quarterback. Remember, Cal's playing either the Thursday or Friday night home game against Virginia Tech this year. I don't really love Cal, but for as much as we kind of downgraded Cal during our preview of the game, they have the same win total as Virginia Tech does at 6.5. So if we look at the things here, me being at 4-4 with 4 games left, Virginia Tech would have to go 3-1 for them to go over. Jack has them at 6-2 or 5-3. He needs 1 or 2 games to go over that number. So it's going to come down to the wire because it's widely considered Virginia Tech's last 4 games are their toughest 4 games. So it seems like, at least early on, based off this number, we like the under right now. But we'll see what happens. As I said, we'll do the 4-game preview of the final grouping coming up in the next episode. Just for those who are curious, 5.5 wins. Well, that's a large group of teams. Wake Forest, Syracuse, Pittsburgh, Boston College, Virginia. 5.5. Not bad for the Wahoos. They were very busy in the transfer portal. They add a lot of talent in the transfer portal. So they are at 5.5. If you've been following along, the 17th team is at 3.5, and it is Stanford. Well, you look at it and you see Stanford down there, and you're like, well, it's going to be another rough season potentially for Stanford, although they did go to the JMA Wireless Dome and won at Syracuse last year. But Stanford widely predicted to have another rough season in the ACC in year 2. For them, Cal, and SMU. All right, so that's the win totals coming out from FanDuel. We'll get more into it as we go along.